Hello students, and welcome to this video on operational budgets. This is a question that I have posted. It is called a trial and error, and I think it's quite a good question because it's a question that consists of the production of two different types of products. There's also two different types of material inputs, and there's also two departments for the calculation of labor costs, and lastly there's also an increase in the material costs at the end of the year, or at the end of the quarter rather. So I think this is quite an interesting question, so I want us to try it and read together. It says trial and error manufactures two products, trial and error, and then they've given you the following information about the third quarter of 2012, and they say that inventory is valued at standard cost and fixed cost, and variable costs are then also considered to be part of the production cost. So they say that trial sells for 35 Rand per unit and error sells for 44 Rand per unit. For trial, 50,000 units are sold every quarter, and for error, 45,000 units are sold every quarter. Then they have given you budgeted inventories. So you will find that we have an opening date and a closing date. So at the opening date for product trial, there were 20,000 units. At the end of the quarter, there were 10,000 units. For product error, there were 10,000 units at the beginning, 15,000 units at the end. Then there's also material X and material Y, and this should be given in kilograms, please note. So at the beginning, there were 15,000 kilograms. At the end, 20,000 kilograms. Material Y, 10,000 kilograms. And at the end of the quarter, 7,000 kilograms. Then they also tell you in the bullet beneath that the inventory is valued at the first in, first out basis. Then after that, another column is provided to you where they give you the standard costs that are applicable. So they say for raw material X, it's 2 kilograms of raw material X that is used in trial at 1 Rand 50. For error, it's 3 kilograms at 1 Rand 50. And you will find in the furthest column, they have also given you the amount per unit, which is the 3 kilograms multiplied by the 1 Rand 50. Then for raw material Y, trial uses 2 kilograms at 1 Rand, and you will find for error that raw material is not used by the product error. Then direct labor. There's two departments. In the first department, trial uses 3 hours at 2 Rand, error uses 2 hours at 2 Rand. In the second department, trial is not does not require any labor in the second department, but error does, and you will find that there's 3 hours at 3 Rand. In the bullet beneath that, they say the manufacturing overheads is 50% of the direct labor costs. Then in the very last bullet, they say it is expected that the last 25% of the purchases of material Y will be at a price of 1 Rand 50. That should be a price increase. If I scroll back and I look at raw material Y, we previously purchased it for 1 Rand. So in the final bullet, it is obvious that it has now increased by 1 Rand 50. In the required part, you need to complete the production budget, the sales budget, the raw material purchase budget, the manufacturing overhead budget, and the cost of sales budget. In number 5, the cost of sales budget is also sometimes referred to as the cost of goods sold budget. So in order to answer this question, I have already drafted for myself just a basic layout. I would advise you to go and retrieve the template that I have posted as well for the operational budgets. It will give you a basic idea of where you need to start when you want to answer a question like this. The first required part of this trial and error question asked us to do the production budget. And in the production budget, we're going to start with the sales units. We will deduct the opening units, and we will add back the closing units. I think sometimes there is a slight misunderstanding. Students don't quite understand why opening units should be deducted and closing units should be added back. So I just want to clear that up. For opening units, we deducted because those units are already available for us. We don't have to make those. They would have typically been our closing stock of the previous quarter. So they are already available and don't need to be produced. For the closing units, we add them to the sales units because closing units refer to those units that need to be available in the warehouse after the quarter has been completed. So we will produce the number of units that are required for us to be sold, and then we will produce a little bit more above and beyond that, because those units need to be kept basically as extras in the warehouse on 30 September 2012. So for the sales unit, we were told that for trial, there's 50,000 units that we sell. For error, it's 45,000 units. Then for the opening units, if I go to my first summary that they've given me there in the second bullet, you will see that for opening units, it was 20,000 units for trial, and for closing units, it was 10,000. Then we will have for error, there was 10,000 units at the beginning, and at the end date, there were 15,000 units. So here to calculate then the total, we're going to say it is the sales units. We will minus the opening, we will add back the closing units. So you will find for a trial, we will then have to produce 40,000 units. For error, we will have to make 50,000 units. And then the total units that need to be produced by this company is 90,000 units. The next budget that is required is the sales budget. And the sales budget is really the simplest of all. So all that is done is that we take the sales units and we multiply it by the selling price to get to a total. So the sales unit will be the same as previous, 50,000 and 45,000 units. Then the selling price was given to us in the first bullet of the question, and it says that trial is sold for 35 Rand and error is sold at 44 Rand. So in order to get to a final total, I'm going to say the number of units times by the selling price of a unit. And I will repeat this calculation for both trial and error. Finally, I want to calculate the total of all the sales. So I will add together the two amounts for the different products, which leads me to have total sales for that quarter, or to forecast total sales of 3,730,000. Right, the third required part is the material purchase budget. I think the material budgets are a little bit trickier in terms of calculations that need to be done. And we have two different materials. So you will find that I now use the columns and I have headings that are the names of different materials. We have two different products. So I'm going to start with product trial. And the first thing I will do is fill out my production units. So please make sure that you start this calculation with production units. So many a time students start this calculation with sales units. That is not correct. So you need to do a production budget before you can do material, a labor, or an overhead budget. So please make sure that you do those calculations. For product trial, we have calculated 40,000 units. So the production units for trial will be 40,000. You will find that I fill that out under both columns because that will be 40,000 units of material X and 40,000 units material Y. So that's important that we have enough material of both types of material to produce these units. Then I'm going to look at the input unit, and that information I will find in my second summary. So if I look at this information, they have told me that of raw material X, trial uses 2 kilograms, and of raw material Y, it also uses 2 kilograms. So be sure to notice that these inputs are measured in some kind of measurable expression like grams, kilograms, meters, liters. So we need 2 kilograms of both these, and then I'm going to calculate my total input. And the total input is then the 40,000 times the 2 kilograms. and I will just repeat that calculation. Right, so now I have total input for a product trial, so I'm going to move on to product error. And again, I will start with my production units. And I'm going to basically repeat this calculation, but now I will fill in information that relates to product error. Right, so for error, if we look at the production units again, please, not sales units, production units. If you look at the production units for error, it was 50,000 units that had to be made. So I'm going to fill out the 50,000 under each column because I will need enough materials of both to make 50,000 units of this product. I need to go and look for the input per unit. So if I go back to my summary, you will see that product error uses 3 kilograms of raw material X, but no kilograms of raw material Y. So I'm going to say 3 there and 0 here. I need to again calculate the total input. So then I'm going to say the 50,000 times 3. And I get total input. Obviously, the answer will there be 0, because if you multiply anything by 0, the answer remains 0. Thereafter, I'm going to calculate a grand total input, and that is basically the sum of the total inputs. So it's the total input of trial plus the total input of error. So in this instance of material X, I'm going to say 80 plus the 150, and then I will say the 80 plus nothing for error, and there I have my total inputs in kilograms. Then I need to go and make sure that I take into account the opening and closing materials. So there's some opening stock that I again will deduct, and closing stock that I will again add back, and the argument is the same. The opening stock is already there. We're going to minus it because we will not buy it, and the closing stock we will add back because we need to buy a little bit more to have some extras in the warehouse by the end of the quarter. So for opening stock of material X, I believe that they have told me that there is 15,000 kilograms. And for the closing stock of material X, I believe that there was 20,000 kilograms. If I move to a material Y, they told me that the opening was 10,000 and the closing stock was 7,000. And now I can calculate my input to purchase. Here, I will then argue that the amount that I will purchase is the grand input minus the opening plus the closing stock. So it's going to be the 230 minus the 15, add back the 20, and I will repeat that calculation for a raw material Y. Then there is a pricing situation that needs to be sorted out. So if I look at the question, they say for raw material Y, the last 25% will be purchased at 150. So there is a price change, but it's only for raw material Y. So what I will do is I start with raw material X. I just want to add some columns here. I'm going to start with raw material X because that is the one that will not be affected, and I can already score some marks. So I'm going to say with the next one, price per input, and if I look at the material X, the raw material X is 150 per kilogram. So I'm going to use the 150 and say 150, and then my cost of material will then be the input to purchase times the price. Right, for my raw material Y, the calculation will be slightly different because now we have to go and split it into the first 25% and the second, or the first 75% and the second 25%. So if we have the raw material Y, you will find that for raw material Y, the total is 77,000 kilograms that we need to buy. So they tell us in the question, the last 25% is at a higher price. So I will first buy my first 75%, and then I will buy the last 25%. And the last 25% is then at R1.50, while the first 75% was simply at R1. So the first thing I need to do is go and figure out the calculations. So I'm going to say 77 times 75% gives me 57750 kilograms, and that needs to be times by a price of 1. So that will simply be the same. So that will give me 57750 rand. Then the 77,000, the last 25% needs to be calculated. That's going to be 77,000 times 25%, and that's going to give me 19,250 kilograms. Those kilograms will be purchased at R1.50. I need to take those kilograms and times them by the higher price, which is 288750. So I'm going to write this in. Just need to add again some, I'm seriously running out of columns here. Right, so here I'm going to have to put in what is the first 75%. And the first 75% we have determined to be 57750. Then we look at the price there, that is R1, and that will give us then a total of 57750 rand. Then we have to go and calculate the second part as well. And then we will have the last 25% of the purchases. And we have determined that to be 19,250 kilograms. This will now be at an increased price. And the increased price was given to us as R1.50. So that will give us an answer that we have also already calculated to be 28,875. So the grand total for cost of material Y will then be the sum of what you would have paid for the first 75%, and you add the last 25% at the increased price, which gives you a total final purchase or cost of material Y to be 86625. I also calculate the total here. So the total cost for all material that needs to be purchased is 439125. And that was your material budget or purchases budget in the instance of having to pay an increased price for material. Righty, then the next required part you will find is that we need to do the manufacturing overhead budget. But in the question, we are told that manufacturing overheads are calculated to be 50% of direct labor cost. So we must first calculate the direct labor budget before we can know what the manufacturing overheads will be, because it will be 50% of that answer. So I'm going to complete the labor budget, and I'm just going to insert lines for myself already because I seem to be running out. Right, so you will find for the labor there are two different departments. So I'm going to start with Department 1. And in Department 1, if I look at my information, they have given me the input and the price. So in Department 1, it would seem that we have an input for trial of 3 hours and a wage of R2 per hour. Right, so then if I look at error, we have a 2 hours at 2 rand. Then we need to go and find, but how much units will we make? And I believe for trial it was it 50,000? Let me just double check. No, it was 40,000 for trial and 50,000 for error. So the cost of department 1 is then 3 times 2 rand times the production units, and I will repeat that calculation. Then we have a second department, right? And I'm just going to call that department 2. So again, we will give an input in hours or labor hours. And for trial, in the second department, there was nothing. But for error in the second department, there was 3 hours and the cost there was 3 rand. And obviously the cost will also be 3 rand. Then wage per hour. Again, we need to go and find our production units. It will be the same as previously. And then we can go and do a calculation to get to a final answer. So for the cost of department 2, we're going to multiply again. This ought to be 0. And here we're going to say 3 times 50,000. And now we can get to total labor costs. And the total labor costs will then be the sum of the answer for department 1 and department 2. So we're going to say 240,000 plus 0. And here we're going to say 200,000 plus 450,000. And there we have our final labor costs. Then if we go to the overhead budget, we will say the total labor costs was what? $240,000 and 650,000. And according to the question, for overheads, we need to have a 50% rate of labor overheads. So the overheads will then be this answer times 50%. And also the answer to error times 50%. That gives us a total of 445,000 for budgeted overheads. Alrighty, we need to do a cost of goods sold budget finally. And here it is then a amount that we need to calculate in terms of what was the prime cost, what was the overheads, take into account opening and closing finished goods to get to the cost of sales. So I have here 2 columns, trial and error. Typically you don't need 3 columns. I just want to make sure students do understand where I got the answers from. Okay, so the first interval will be materials used. Then the second interval will be your labor costs. That adds up to prime cost. Thereafter, we need the overheads. And that will give us a final production cost total. Thereafter, we will take opening finished goods. And we will add it. Closing finished goods will be deducted. And we get to the cost of sales. Righty, so we need to start with the easier ones to calculate. And I think the easier ones will be our labor cost. So we have done certain calculations, and I'm literally now just adding them in. So for labor, we had to do a calculation, and I'm taking that information and putting it into this statement. Then I am also looking for my overhead information, which I have just calculated. Literally taking my answers and bringing it to this forecast. And now I need to go and calculate the materials which were used, right? So now you need to be very, very careful, because we have calculated the material purchases budget, which is not the material that is used. It is the material that is purchased. So we need to go and do a calculation to see, but how much then is the material used? And I think the simplest way to do that is to consider a T account, right? So you should be familiar with the T accounts that we do for management accounting, and one of those will be your material or your direct material cost, right? So here we need to have an opening balance, we need to have a closing balance, we need to have purchases, and on the negative side we need to have those that are used, and of course it must then all balance. So what you will do is then to go and say the purchases will be the easy part, because we have already calculated the purchases. If I go to my material purchase budget, the material purchases have added up to this amount of 439,125. Now we need to go and see what is the value of the opening stock and what is the value of the closing stock. So for the purpose of the opening stock, I need to go and see, but what did we have for material X and what did we have for material Y? And I believe for material X in opening stock, we had 15,000 kilograms, and the price of raw material X is R1.50. For raw material Y in opening stock, we had 10,000 kilograms, and at that stage, the price was still R1. So if I multiply these, I will be able to calculate what the values of the opening materials were, and I can get to a total. And the total value of the opening materials was then the 32,500. Then we need to calculate the closing balance, and now we need to remember that there was a slight price change with material Y. So for material X in the closing, there were 20,000 kilograms, and for material Y, there was 7,000 kilograms. The price was R1.50 still for material X, but material Y increased to R1.50 as well. So I need to times these two to get to the value. And if I calculate the sum of those two, I get 40,500. So that will then constitute the value of closing materials. And now I will be able to calculate what the material usage was. So I'm going to then say it is the opening stock plus the purchases. That should be my balancing figure. And then to calculate the amount that was used, I will take the balancing figure minus the value of the closing, which was 431,125. So that amount will then be written here in materials used. You will see for materials used, we don't have a calculation for the units separately because we calculated in terms of raw material X and Y. There we can now get to an answer for labor costs and also a subtotal for production costs, which is the prime cost, and we add the overheads. Finally, we need to do a calculation for opening finished goods and closing finished goods. So they've given us the number of units, but they have not calculated for us the price. So for opening and closing finished goods, you must go and do a support calculation. And this support calculation will now be done in terms of units, because we have been given the finished goods units values. So we have material X, we have material Y, and we need to just make sure we have the columns trial and error. Then we have some labor, but we have labor in department 1 and we have labor in department number 2, and then we have our overheads. So we are trying to calculate what the cost or what the value is of a single unit that we have. So for material X, it would be for trial 2 kilograms times 150. For raw material Y, it is 2 kilograms times 1 rand. That price, of course, later changes, so we'll talk about that just now. For material X here, it's 3 kilograms at 1 rand 50, and we do not use any raw material Y. Then in the labor department 1 for trial, we have 3 hours times 2 rand, and in error we have 2 hours times 2 rand. Then we need to go to the second department. There's nothing for trial, but for error we have 3 times 3 rand. And then the overheads is then 50% of our labor costs. So here we're going to say it is the 6 rand plus nothing times 50%. And here we will say it is the 4 rand plus the 9 rand times 50%. So we're going to go to a total, and it's going to be the sum of all this. Now, the only problem we face is the fact that by the end of the year, the price of raw material Y changes, right? So here we will now find that error does not use raw material Y. So it is just trial that will change by year end. So, or rather quarter end, I beg your pardon. So for quarter end, we're going to have to do a different calculation. I'm just going to copy this. And then I need to go and change the answer to raw material Y. Because now it will be 2 kilograms at 1 rand 50 rather, which will give me then a different total, and that will be 15 rand per unit. And after doing these calculations, I can go and calculate my opening and stock and closing stock now. So for trial, we had opening units of, if I look at it, it's 20,000 opening units. And I now need to go and times that by the answer for a single, or the value of a single unit. For the finished, we have a 10,000 units. And we need to times that now by the closing value, which will be 15 Rand rather. For error, we have 10,000 units at the beginning, and we times that by the price of 24 Rand. And we also have units at the end, which is 15,000 units times the 24 Rand. Right, and then I can get to the sum of everything. And I will be able to calculate my cost of sales then. So that will be my total answer for production cost. Add back the opening stock minus the closing stock, and that gives me cost of sales of 1776125. Yes, so this was the calculations that we had to do for this question. I think it's quite comprehensive, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video and that you at least have learned something new. So good luck with the operational budgets. I think it's quite an interesting topic. And yes, I will be posting more videos and then hoping to hear from you in terms of any other requests. So until then, have a wonderful day.